Okay, welcome back. Now in this next project lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the Mental-Ray architectural shaders and how they're different from standard Phong and Blinn shaders and Lambert shaders, how they're more physically accurate, and how they're a better choice when you're working on architectural visualizations, where photorealism is extremely important and you need to have some physically accurate shaders. So let's go ahead and open up the example scene. And the one you're looking for is architectural underscore start. So let's open that up. And here we go. Let's do a quick render preview to see what we've got to start with. Okay, that is very, very disgusting. Now everything's modeled. Everything is set up here. It's a very simple scene setup actually. All the lights are set up and everything. The only thing that's really missing is the materials and shaders as usual. Okay, it's a pretty simple room. A window in the front, you got a window in the back over here, you got a surface here of ceramic tiles or whatnot, and then you have some miscellaneous objects like this vase and this sort of teacup, whatever you want to call that, and a wine glass, and then a bottle of wine or champagne or whatever you want to imagine is in that bottle. Okay, pretty simple scene setup, but the render, of course, looks awful and disgusting. So what we're going to do is we're going to use architectural shaders from Mental-Ray that are available in XSI 6 and above to go ahead and make this look more realistic and make it look better than what it looks now, because right now it's pretty much unacceptable. So let's open up the material manager. Okay, let's create a new material. Hit create new material, go to nodes and go to illumination. We're not going to use a Lambert, Blinn, or Phong or any of these common shaders. We're going to use the architectural shader. So what's the difference between the architectural shader and say this Phong shader right here? Well, the architectural shader is designed to be physically accurate, obviously when using the Mental-Ray renderer, which is the default integrated renderer of XSI. So the architectural material is going to give us more accurate reflections, more accurate diffuse parameters. It's a more accurate, it's a physically accurate shader that makes things obviously look better. If a shader is physically accurate, it helps your render to look more photorealistic. And photorealism is something that artists working in the architectural visualization industry strive for. So let's go ahead and plug this architectural material into the surface, shadow, and the photon ports of that Phong or of that material. Let's delete that Phong, we don't need it. And now we can use this this new material here basically for anything. Let's start off with these ceramic tiles down here. Okay, so what we're going to do is set up the material for that. So let's open up the material at property page here and change the name of the Phong to say ceramic tiles. So ceramic tiles matte. So here's our ceramic tiles material. Okay, now what we need to do is adjust some of the settings for this material. Actually, the next thing we want to do is right click on the ceramic tiles material and click on assign to selection. So now these ceramic tiles in our scene have this material applied, and you notice that it looks a lot different than when we had the Phong. If I select it and I do a render region here, this is what we get. This architectural material is more physically accurate and projects things like reflections and refractions a lot better and a lot nicer than, say, a standard Phong material would. It has a lot more parameters as well. If we look here, we have a ton of tabs. We have illumination, transparency, reflection, indirect illumination. We have an ambient occlusion tab, an optimization tab, and an additional options tab. Okay, so we have a lot of options here for this material. This material is very flexible. Because of all these options, it allows you to use it for many different things. Mainly hard surfaces. You can use it for things like glass. You can use it to create realistic water actually. You can use it to create ceramics, pottery, realistic wood, nice varnished wood. You can use it for a ton of different things, really. You can't really use it for doing realistic human skin or jello, really, but you can use it for most things that you'll ever need to use it for. So in this case, let's set it up so that we can have these ceramic tiles looking better. Okay, let's change for example, the diffuse color. Let's change that. Let's make it lighter and let's give it like a tint of blue. Maybe we'll want to go with something bluish here. I'm going to use numerical values that I already have set up. So I'm going to go with 0.8 in the red, 0.8 in the green, and 1 in the blue. That looks a little bit too purplish though, which I really don't want. So let me increase that there. Let me increase this here. Now it looks more like a blue instead of purple or pink. Of course, you can do it whatever color that you want to. So now what we're going to do is switch over to the transparency and reflection tab here, and we're going to change some of these settings around. I'm going to leave the index of refraction at 1.4. Now, index of refraction, these are based on real life. Objects in real life have indices of refraction. You can look them up in certain books. You can Google it to try to find the index of refraction, say of glass or of water or of a diamond or of whatever it is that you want to do. So just do a Google search or go to your local library and find a book that has values for index of refraction for real life objects. And then what you do is you just plug in that index of refraction here, whatever value that may be, and the architectural shader will go ahead and mimic that in XSI when you render out. So it's actually pretty neat that you can do that. Okay, glossiness. Glossiness here under reflection is going to control the glossiness of the reflection. What does that mean? Well, in real life, some object surfaces have glossy reflections. That is to say, the reflections are not perfectly mirror-like. They're kind of glossy, kind of grainy looking. So just to show you the effect of that, let's do render region here. Oops, should not have done that. Let's go ahead and select shader here. So we're back. Do render region, holding down Q. Now, these ceramic tiles right now are reflecting stuff in the scene. That's because the reflectivity is set to 0.6 or 60% reflectivity. That's just over half. So we can see the reflection of this teapot, whatever this is, in the ceramic tiles. We can also see reflection of the window and the light coming from outside the window. Okay, now what we want to do is change that reflection because we don't want the reflection to look too perfect. Right now you can see the reflection perfectly fine. Now the index of refraction of 1.4 is changing that reflection, the way that this object reflects this light. So if we set this to 1, okay, never mind. Edit that part out of the video. I repeat, edit that part out of the video. And we're going to start over in 3, 2, 1. So what we can do here with glossiness is let's put the glossiness at 0.6. And now you notice that the reflections come out kind of glossy. They're not perfect reflections. And this looks more realistic. Now, right now it looks really grainy and disgusting. That's because our render settings are set to low quality. So if we were to increase the quality of the render settings, that of course gets fixed by anti-aliasing. But we don't want to perform too much anti-aliasing now in this preview stage because it'll take us longer to do renders. So we want to do fast, quick renders, boom, and done. Okay? So let's set that glossiness to 0.6, which will look pretty good. All right. Now, down here we have a lot more parameters. We have, for example, anisotropy parameters. We have a metal material parameter, and we are not going to use that just right now. Although if you turn that on, you notice that it affects the way that the reflections look, and this is good for doing, say, metallic surfaces. Actually, it looks pretty good on these ceramic tiles, to be honest with you. So I'm going to leave that metal material option checked on because it actually looks pretty good. Okay, and the other thing down here is the view angle dependency, or the BRDF. Now you have two options here. You can set the BRDF, which are the incidence reflections, to the default index of refraction, which is what IOF stands for. So it's going to set the reflection BRDF based on the index of refraction, and the index of refraction right now is 1.4. Now if you don't want that, you can set the BRDF manually. Now manually here you get a few different options. The main options here to look at is facing reflectivity and perpendicular reflectivity. So let me show you how this works. The facing reflectivity are the reflections you'll see when looking dead on straight at the ceramic tiles. So let's move our camera angle here so we can look down and straight at the ceramic tiles. And let's do render region right here. Notice how the reflections are not very strong. We don't see a lot of reflectivity. If I increase that facing reflectivity from 0.2 to a full 100% or 1, now it's very reflective. We can see it's reflecting everything. Now it's super reflective at that point. So I can put it back down to 0.2. Now if we move the camera so we're looking at this more of a facing away angle or perpendicular angle, and now we do a render region of this, it's going to be super reflective. It's going to be very reflective. Now we can see all the reflections. We can see the teapot, light coming from outside, the window, and whatnot. Although it's a little bit hard to see the window from that angle. Let's try like this. Okay, the reflections are glossy, so it's hard to see, but this is actually the window. It's just very glossy. And let me actually turn the glossiness off by putting this back to 1. And now you can see there's the window. See that? So the more perpendicular the angle that we're looking at this object from, the more reflective it is. The more we're looking at it from a facing angle that is directly dead on, the less reflective it's going to be. And this is how many objects in real life behave. That's why this architectural material is so essential if you're trying to do architectural visualizations or photorealistic renderings. Okay? So we can actually turn that perpendicular reflectivity off or on, or just change the value of it altogether. I'm going to keep it at 0.2 and 1 because that looks good enough for what we're doing. And let me take the glossiness, and I'm going to place the glossiness, I'm going to put back to 0.6. So we got those nice glossy reflections, which look bad right now. Obviously our anti-aliasing is down, but not to worry. That can be fixed when we're finished with the project. And we can go ahead and change those settings so it looks better. Okay. Now we have an indirect illumination tab. There's really nothing here for us to mess around with, mainly because we're not using Final Gather or Global Illumination, and obviously these ceramic tiles are not translucent, but you can use this translucency parameter to make objects look translucent. Say if there was curtains in front of that window and light was coming through it. Then we have the ambient occlusion tab. This allows you to composite ambient occlusion directly on this on the material, as opposed to doing ambient occlusion through compositing, or ambient occlusion through compositing the ambient occlusion shader node in the render tree. So you can actually turn ambient occlusion on from here and get different effects. So I can turn it on, changes the look completely of this, and then I can play around with the settings of this. So I could change the max distance. Right now it's set to 1. I can increase that distance more and more and more. You see how it's darkening up, and areas where there's contact shadows will become darker, of course. Okay, so that's pretty much how that works. I'm going to set that back to 1, and I'm going to take enable off. I'm going to disable the ambient occlusion. Then we have optimization. Optimization is a great feature of the architectural shaders. Why is that? That's because the optimization parameters allow you to optimize the way that this shader works. Now, one of the reasons why in the past it was very difficult to use something like glossy reflections, for example, on a surface like this, is because it would take forever to render. That's because the old methods of the old days of mental ray were incredibly slow when it came to glossy reflections. Now, however, we're very fortunate that we have the mental ray architectural shaders. That's because this shader has these optimization features that allow you to render these glossy reflections super fast, within seconds. Okay? So one thing that we can do is we can go down here to the reflection section of parameters here, and we can actually enable different things. We can actually enable fall off. This controls the amount of distance where reflections can be seen. In real life, a lot of reflective objects are more reflective the closer they are to an object. The farther that the surface gets from that object, the less you see the reflection, to the point where you can no longer see the object reflected. So we can turn this on, this fall off enable, and change the distance here. So let's change the distance. Now you can see with a distance of 3.8, if something is farther away than 3.8, it's not going to be visible in the reflections. So let me increase that distance to say 10. Now we'll see something interesting happens here. Since the teapot is sitting right on top, and let me change that to say 20 so it's the effect is more visible. Notice how the little teapot is sitting on top of the ceramic tiles. You can see the reflection. That's because the teapot is so close to the ceramic tiles. We can't see the reflection of the window, however, because the window is so far away, so the reflection fades away to the point where we don't even see it. So that's what the fall off enables you to do. I'm going to turn the fall off off, however. I really don't need it. And now let's go up here to reflection, and these are the interpolation parameters of this shader. We can interpolate refractions and reflections. What's the upside and what's the downside to this? Okay, the upside is that if we turn this on for reflections, for example, reflections will be rendered faster, nicer. Notice how now the reflection doesn't look grainy. It looks like if we had turned anti-aliasing up all the way, but we didn't. We were able to get the beauty of turning on anti-aliasing without taking a hit to our render speed and slowing us down. How did that happen? Magic? Not really. What's happening is that the reflection rays are being interpolated. This means that they're not physically accurate anymore. In order to be able to get this effect, it kind of cheats and it won't accurately display the reflections. So now your reflections won't be 100% physically accurate, but you know what? In this case, it looks so good and it still looks pretty darn accurate, to be honest with you. So it's really a balancing act what you're trying to achieve. If you feel like this doesn't look good enough, then you may want to go for more physically accurate reflections, which is going to take longer to render. However, to most people and to the naked eye, you can probably get away with this, and nobody's going to complain and say, oh wait, those interpolated reflections on the ceramic tiles in the back of the room over there are not physically accurate. I don't think anyone's going to tell you that unless you told them that you did this. If you didn't, they're probably not going to be able to figure it out. So interpolating reflections is a great optimization feature of the architectural shader and allows you to render faster and nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep that turned on so we render faster. Okay, and additional options does just that, gives us additional options. For example, we could turn bumps off for diffuse only. We can also turn off weak internal reflections, and we can even turn off the visible area light highlights. So if we have any lights that are set up as area lights, and they're visible area lights, this will turn off the highlights from those area lights. And we have a few other added effects over here. We can turn on thin walled mode, so treat the material as if it were thin material as opposed to a thick material, which is the default. We can also enable backface culling here, so only one side of the object gets rendered as opposed to both sides, which is a little optimization feature. So you can see how this architectural material gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of power when it comes to rendering. So now we have the ceramic tiles set up. They're looking pretty good. I like the way that they're reflecting things. So we can see here the reflections aren't exactly physically accurate, but they actually look good enough. it looks pretty good. Awesome. Okay, so now that you got a quick run through of the, or a pretty lengthy run through of the architectural shader, I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we're going to pick up the pace and move a little bit quicker because it's really more of the same. And we're going to go ahead and apply architectural material shaders to the rest of these objects and continue chipping away until we have this project scene done. So I'll see you in the next video.